So I tried to remember back when I was a student, what do I wish somebody had just sat me down and explained to me about getting a job and work, etc. And I discovered I couldn't remember back that far. 1979 is a long time. Nevertheless, I made up a bunch of stuff. You have to start somewhere. One of the things that's really important is that first job. That's the job that goes on your resume from now on. And I accidentally got it right. I started at the bottom of the top. This guy invented corporate design. This is Saul Bass. He does not get any better for corporate identity. And I carried foam core for Saul Bass. Occasionally, I was able to cut foam core. And once they actually let me do some design. So, but what I understood was that whenever I went from that point on, oh, you worked at Saul Bass. So that first job really is important. You choose the job based on the power of the ideas and not necessarily just the money. This was something that I was told. For the rest of your career, you need to become a sponge. You need to inundate yourself with experiences and graphic design and industrial design, everything. The exposure you get here at this school is amazing. And you need to soak it in, and for the rest of your career, so that when you get that one project that needs that insight, you've already got it. So you need to find out when you're checking out the groceries, why is it that a National Enquirer cover looks so urgent and the Vogue looks so calm? You need to understand that. And it applies to fine art, exhibits, photography, architecture. You need to just bathe in this every day. And that's part of what being a good designer is knowing what sources of inspiration are available. Now, we used to have to go to libraries. And now, evidently, there's this interweb thing that has a lot of this stuff on it. So, things like fashion, you know. And one of the things that's also important here is you'll notice, for exhibit design in particular, we're not saying, hey, get inspired by a lot of exhibits. The best ideas come from outside that market. This was something I wasn't taught. There is value in beauty. Too often we get our corporate standards and our communication goals and all this stuff, and beauty gets run over. And yet this is what sort of enriches the soul of people. So beautiful things, nobody will ever set foot in these shoes. But the fact that they were done, it's incredible. It's like a catalyst, and it enables you to think beyond the box. This was shown earlier today, but this idea of a clear plexiglass bicycle was beautiful. I mean, mountain bikes, they're never beautiful. This was beautiful. So as a result, 4 of these ended up in the lobby of RockShox. Now, this is important. Somebody mentioned the idea of you know, forgetting some of these elective classes. Everything counts. Everything's important. You want to be an exhibit designer, really pay attention in the typography class. One of my first projects was this classic. I've heard you guys like snowmobiles out here, and for 2 years, I designed all of the graphics for Polaris snowmobiles. I have never been on a snowmobile. And that may show in the high quality of design of this thing. On the other hand, the client loved it, and that whole gold pinstripe idea was used top to bottom for 2 years for their entire product line. They sold a lot of them for it. Now, this is another important thing, and you have to almost be selfish, but you have to think about your portfolio. When you're designing something, let's say a trade show exhibit, it might have a lifespan of 4 days or a year or 2 years. And it's like, well, you know, as long as it looks good for 4 days or a year or something, that's fine. But you need to look at it and say, what's that going to look like in 10 years or 20 years? Or as if the snowmobile, 40 years. So you need to be careful, and you need to design timeless. The way to do that is stick to the principles, good design, and that's really important. Because otherwise, if you design something that's trendy, that's right up to the moment, that's fashionable, it's going to go out of style in about a week, and your portfolio is going to look like ancient history. This exhibit doesn't look it, but it was designed before most of you were born. The focus was this central tower, and there are 300 names of every employee in the company. 10 years later, we did another one. And the fin in the back there has 750 employees, every employee in the company. This was done 10 years ago, and now there's 2,000 employees at Duncan Aviation, and there are photographs overhead of every employee in the company. We're now doing another one. It's the same concept. So that timeless quality is really important. Okay, now, we're all here, we're in the exhibits, or advertising, or graphics, or typography, or whatever. You've all got the little segments. But the thing that you need to understand is we're not designing an exhibit, we're designing communication. When the client hires you, they don't necessarily want a gorgeous exhibit. What they really want is they want you to grab the customer, grab the attendee, and have him walk out understanding what that client wants. And you know, ultimately what we're doing here is in the service of commerce. We're trying to sell stuff. We're trying to sway opinion. We're trying to change opinion. So as long as you understand that I'm not really designing an exhibit, I'm designing a space, a three-dimensional space that happens to have some stuff in it, but it is entirely focused on how do we communicate an idea. This was an exhibit that is, you know, it's 80% empty. There's not much structure here. And each one of these ideas we call a whirligig. This company makes stuff that programs to reward their employees, to report, you know, if you're Pepsi and you have somebody that has been there 10 years, these are the guys that have the program that, you know, make them feel special. And each one of these has an idea behind it. So, that says fantastic. So, one of the source of ideas that is kind of radical is clients have a lot of really good ideas. And this idea of being able to listen to them instead of putting your ego into it and listen to the client. Here's a situation where the same client had a brochure that says, grow your people. So we put a potted plant with an animated person that would come up out of the grass. The fact that this was all surrounded by exhibits for lawyers made it all the more special. People came in, you know, and here's this animated high five thing. And people came in, they loved it. They loved hanging out at the exhibit. And when the presenter is talking about, you know, what happens if your employees are not appreciated, he walks over to this Frankenstein switch, throws the switch, and everything in the exhibit stops. All emotion stops, lights go out, sound goes dead. And it was a really powerful statement of the importance of that. This is another way that we put it. We want to fill the mind, not the space. The client really would rather have less structure. It's not that's why architects, when they go into trade show exhibits, tend not to do very well. They miss that fact that it's a communication medium. Now, you guys have all this technology to deal with, and it's great. But this stuff changes like weekly. And so in the course of your careers, you are going to have to reinvent yourself many, many times. I've had to do it several times, but this pace of this change has accelerated, and you're going to constantly come back to, it's all about communication. How do I get these messages across? And then all of the technology, you're going to revel in it. You're going to grab it by the horns and really, really take that to heart. I used to think that, you know, all those really good ideas came from these big ad agencies and big media companies and all that stuff, and I thought, wow, that'd be great to work in one of those. And what I discovered was it ain't so. This is my office. It's about the size of 2 dorm rooms. And all of the ideas that we've had for the past 20 years have come out of this thing that looks like a large hallway. So the size of the office, it's just about the quality of the people. Now, we do have a lot of small employees. That seems to be kind of a requirement. When I turned 21 years old, I talked my dad into taking me to the Aspen Design Conference, which was the conference at the time. And I got to meet Charles Eames. This guy was my hero, and he is to this day. He did furniture, museum exhibits. That button in the bottom right-hand corner, he invented multimedia. And one of the notes that I took that day when I heard him speak was, innovate, but only as a last resort. And it took me years to figure out what that meant. But here's one of the most innovative people on the planet, and he's saying, it's not about innovation for innovation's sake. It's about innovative when you need it. It's about solving the client's problems. 2 months later, he passed away, and I was extremely glad that I worked up the courage, and I went up and I introduced myself to Charles Eames. Another one of my heroes is Massimo Vignelli, and this has been the guidance that I've used for my entire career. A good designer should be able to design anything. Massimo said that, you know, even a graphic designer should be able to design a car. Probably not a great car, but he should be able to do that. So I get this call from HOK, it's an architectural office, and they say, it's this friend of my brother's, he's an architect. He goes, can you guys do signs? I said, yeah, I can do signs. I mean, you know, heck, I've got exhibits, they got signs on them, right? He goes, we're doing this airport in Doha. Can you come on over? Because we really need to start on this pretty quick. Okay, yeah. Doha is not near Australia. It is in the Persian Gulf, surrounded by Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. And it has 40% of the world's natural gas. And as I'm in the conference room and they're showing me the renderings, I realize this thing is massive. There's 76 gates. It's like building another O'Hare and dropping the signage thing on me. So I figured I'll just buy, airport signage for dummies. And I discovered there isn't one, but this whole idea of being fearless and just plunging in and learning it as we went. The thing was enormous. This was a $2.5 billion building. So we started. We built models. I'm a firm believer in actual physical models. The clients love them. We tear them apart. We glue them back together. We built more models. More models. Hundreds of models were built over the course of 7 years that this project took. We did elevations, sign families. How do you make them all look different but all the same? And the results were pretty amazing. If you ever go to Doha, on your way to, I don't know, Chicago, you will see a sign program that just doesn't look like any other program out there. Now, at this point, I will admit I had never designed signs, never. I didn't, nothing. And I hadn't had any classes in them either, but I figured, hey, probably could figure it out. We did kiosks, hundreds of kiosks, and in designing this, the idea that it was timeless was extraordinarily important. They did not want to replace this stuff after 10 years because it was yesterday's idea. So, be fearless, absolutely fearless. Sometimes you get lucky. I didn't realize luck was really important in this, but this was for the ceramic tiles of Italy. And I showed the design to the client. They're Italians, and they said, "Why is it red?" I was like, "Oh, it's like the Italian flag. It's like Ferrari. It's like Ferrari red." And they went, "That's great!" And I accidentally discovered that all these ceramic tile factories in Italy are around this Ferrari factory, and you cut them and they bleed Ferrari red. So, sometimes you get unlucky. Same client, 3 years later, I'm in Italy, and this is about what you can do with ceramic tiles. This was a giant fountain. This one was pigments from the tiles, and exhibits up. I go to lunch. I come back. The client goes, "Did you see him?" "No." "Who?" And they go, "He loved the booth." I was like, "Who?" "This guy. Luca di Montezemolo came through the booth. He's the president of Ferrari, and he said, 'I like the booth. Maybe we should hire the American architetto to design a Ferrari exhibit.'" And the moment passed, and I wasn't there, and I didn't get to design Ferrari's exhibit. So that's important. Always have your own projects. This is really important. I thought that there had to be a better way to get people not to pour oil down drains. They put these stupid warning labels, and I thought it's got to be a nonverbal thing. So we designed the fish drain itself to handle that. Now, if you go to New Zealand, you may see some of these, and this is how it was implemented there. Less really is more. So, I worked for a consulting firm that did a lot of the branding for Apple during the early days. And we all have this vision of Apple, but in the days that I was working there, this is what their exhibit program looked like. It was awful. It was awful. And so they brought, and at the time they didn't have any money, so they brought me in and they said, "We need to rev this thing, but you can't change the system." So I took this same system and just cleaned it up. So a single message, cleaned everything out. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that there was some of the white look of Apple was based on this. I also worked on the branding for the original Macintosh, and it was miserable trying to do these presentations because the most sophisticated piece of equipment we had was a Xerox machine. So, because there were no computers that would work. You had a PC or an Apple II. These things were worthless for design. So in this idea of a human computer, that's how we ended up with this. Now, over the course of those years, I'll leave you with this one last idea. I dealt with Steve. And, but I didn't deal with this Steve, the one who had all the edges polished off of him. It was this guy. And I gotta tell you, there is nothing quite like being yelled at by Steve Jobs. We had sweat bullets on a Macintosh project, and you know, sleeping bags in the design office. It was all hands on board. We were doing presentations to Steve every week. And we got to the end of one of them, and Steve says, "Is that the best you can do?" And my first thought was, jerk. And as I've thought about it over the years, I've wanted to always say, yes, that was the best I can do. And that's followed me for my entire career. Is it the best that you can do? Yes, this is the best I can do. And I hope that when you guys get out there and get in the real world, that when you make a presentation, you can say, yes, this is the best I can do. Thank you very much.